Library, the experiences of Baker Library. She'll talk with us for about half an hour, after which we can have a question-answer session. Debra.
Thank you. Thank you. My mother has always said, volunteer to go first, because then you're in and out fast. So thank you, Anil, for putting me first. It is a great pleasure to be here. I had about a 17-hour flight, and so it gave me an opportunity to catch up on some reading. And of course, what should someone from Harvard Business School be reading but the Harvard Business Review, right? And I ran across an article that I thought was kind of fun and very timely. It's called Getting an Audience to Remember Your Presentation. So I thought, well, let's look at a couple of tips here. Number one, it says, make sure you follow a sequence, a very planned sequence, because adults can only take in so much information. They'll only remember, or they'll remember best the things you say first, which I thought it would be last. But given what we heard today, the fact that you'll all be asleep by the time I finish, I think it makes sense to focus on the first. The other thing it said is to draw connections. And we also heard the importance of creating community and making those kinds of connections. So I'll try to do that today. And the last one I like the best is it says, make your audience work. Because if there's active engagement from your audience, they'll process things that you're talking about as opposed to falling asleep. So stay on your toes, because I'm going to try to make you work. It's always a pleasure to talk about one's work, because the first thing you have to do is think about, well, what might make sense to people? What would connect with people? What are people interested in? And so in preparing for this, I went back looking at about 5-10 years of documents and internal correspondence and other things that I had written, other presentations that I had done. So in preparing this, it is a form of reflection, which unfortunately, I think in our busy lives, we don't take much time to do. So thank you for that opportunity for me to step back and look at some of the work. It was amazing to me how much has changed in 5 years. How things that we started, a path we started down, something came in from right field. Oh, right, a new dean. That's sort of an important thing. Left field, I had 5 open positions. And in a library of 100, that's still enough to think about shifts in your staffing. The economic downturn of 2008 changed the way we think about libraries. And of course, the digital revolution that's happening has changed things. So what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about, it sounds perhaps a tired analogy, but this is very much a journey. Work that we've started and that we've spent a lot of time thinking about, readjusting, repositioning. You know, the old pivot or persevere. Thinking about, do we move on? Do we stick with what we have? But I'd like to start with just a little bit of a context. Because I am an eternal optimist. I want you to know that. So you'll hear that lens from my conversation. I'm a person who looks at a glass not half full. Actually, I look at it as 3/4 full. And I also look at challenges as opportunities. So the first thing that I want you to take away, so this is the one you're supposed to remember, right, is that I think libraries today have limitless possibilities in the digital world. I don't see this as a threat. I see this as a huge opportunity for us. So I hope you can embrace that as we're talking over the next couple of days to see what those opportunities are, not just what those challenges are. So, as I said, now it's going to take me a little while because I'm also technically challenged. See if I can get this to work. Right. I'm also blessed, as Anil is, with some incredibly supportive senior leaders who think libraries are incredibly important. This is Drew Faust, the president of Harvard University, who typifies libraries as the circulation system that moves information as lifeblood throughout the university. This is our provost, Alan Garber, who thinks that libraries are going to change, but there will always be still the center of the university. At a recent retreat of library directors at Harvard, he made this last quote, which I think is, again, a huge opportunity for us, that if a student at Harvard only leaves with being able to write a paper, do a project, take an exam from information found on Google, then the university has failed, not just the library. And then, okay, this is my rock star. This is Nithin Nuria, perhaps known to many of you. And Nithin is also a person who sees challenges as opportunities. And he's really interested in us thinking about what does library mean and how do we shape a new meaning for library. So cast back 10 years. Now, do all of you know Clay Christensen's work in disruption? This is major disruption. This is Baker Library, 10 years ago. We started on a path of a huge renovation that enabled us to increase our square footage by thousands of square feet. Think about it, as opposed to reducing square footage. We were able to bring in 60 faculty offices, so we now have faculty residing right in the library. We were able to create a conservation and preservation lab that allows us to maintain the unique collections that we have. And it was also a time for us to bring a new executive director on. Those of you who may have met Mary Lee Kennedy, she was a really interesting choice. Non-academic librarian coming to Harvard Business School, had been the knowledge management, or knowledge network manager at Microsoft. So brought a very corporate view of the academic library. And Mary Lee was really instrumental in not just finishing off the rebuild of Baker Library, but setting us on this path of thinking beyond library building, library collections, and to be more encompassing of all of the information that is generated on campus. So I think this is a great symbol for us because it was a huge starting point, an inflection point that made us rethink. So when I came on, oops, sorry, I told you I was challenged. So when I came on as executive director 5 years ago, Mary Lee had already started down, I think, a very positive path. I was one of her senior directors. I was part of the development of that strategy. And the fact that that we didn't look for an outside director, executive director, that we stuck with me, as part of that senior management team, was a huge signal from the dean's office that we were to continue down this path. But I thought, there was a lot that had changed since when Mary Lee came about 6 years before me. And so we looked around like all good MBA students and decided we better find a framework. And I thought, being the new person on the block, new dean, perhaps I should look at our dean's research. And this is some of Nithin's work, which is called the 4+2 formula for sustaining successful businesses. And he and colleagues looked at 160 businesses, successful businesses, over a 10-year period, and they analyzed them along 200 management points, or types of elements of management theory and practice. And what they found, interestingly enough, that all of the successful companies had 4 primary management practices and 2 of 4 secondary practices. So as you can see, now I'm an English major, not a math major, so your second job is to keep track of the formula for me, right? Okay, so the 4 on the left are the primary practices, and we chose innovation and partnerships as 2 of the secondary, and as I go through this, I think you'll see why we chose those 2. And if we add these together, our sustainable business success is what we call Baker 3.0. No, see? Right. So our first step is strategy. We looked at the strategy that had been in place. We had a future state that had been articulated that ended the year that I took the executive director's position. And so we started by having a look at what was the path that we were on. And this is meant to be an eye chart for you, not that you read it, but to see that through this progression, for years, we had been on a steady path. Nithin is very much like this as well as a senior leader. He's not constantly moving us around. We know from day to day what his 5 priorities are. And, and we stuck to these throughout a very programmatic approach. What we did during the reflection is we used a management consultant. You'd think we could have done this ourselves, right? But it's always helpful to have an outside view, a perspective of someone who isn't deep in the process, has to live it, but deep in the process to help us manage it. So what we did is, this looks very linear, and the language is similar to what you have seen in any kind of research project, is understand the landscape, see what the opportunities are, determine a direction, and then execute. But what I found different in this particular model and the work with How Management was it was very focused on, as you up the engagement of your stakeholders, you increase the opportunities to communicate. And this was a very explicit approach that we had not taken before. So as we increased engagement, all 100 of our staff were working on the plan. Our senior leadership at the school, so our head of HR, our head of finance, my boss, who's the director of administration, the administrative dean, we pulled all kinds of people into this process. And as we did it, we increased different kinds and tried different formats of communication. And I think while that was a really successful way to approach it, what I felt was even more interesting is he kept asking us lots of questions. Like the whole time was question. It was like, Howard, do we have one more question we have to go through? Couldn't we just move on? So questioning, keeping us on our toes, thinking about the many options. And we're still doing that. 5 years ago, we started the strategy reflection work. This year, when Nithin brought together his board of dean's advisors, he wrote a caselet about, small HBS cases have to be what now, 30, 35 pages just to get your money's worth. Now he wrote a 10-page case, which we call caselet, that talked about what was happening in the landscape of management education and what were the challenges HBS was facing based on these changes. And so what we did is we looked at what did our ecosystem that we were planning to put in place, how is it impacted by a number of these questions. So again, constantly questioning. And what came out of it, and I'm so sorry, I should have introduced 2 of my colleagues are here from our Mumbai office, Namrata and Rachna, and they handed out some materials for you. This is a copy of something that we keep in place. Everybody has one of these laminated at their desks, and what it does is it brings all of these things together. What's our mission? Where are we heading? What are the things that we think are our enduring goals, our strategic capabilities? And then what are the priorities? Where are we going to continue to focus our energies? And this kind of document just keeps it front of mind for people, and it keeps a consistent language out. One of the, we try really hard to use the same terms. We define things, and we kind of overdo this, I think, to some extent. But in fact, what it helps to do is reduce confusion about where are you, and it creates a greater understanding. So I have copies of that for you, and hopefully you can look through it later. So this is what part of the formula? You guys are letting me down already. The second one, right, execute. Okay, so in execution, what Nithin's research showed is that you have to do all 4 of these primary management strategy, or the strategy, execution, culture. You have to do these flawlessly. So that's why you have to focus on them. Execution, the way to wealth, this is one of the projects that we've been working on with one of our faculty members. And as we were hearing this morning, is it as creators of knowledge, how does the library support the faculty's work? So we set up a new group that was that's called the Faculty Research Innovation Team. And they find projects that faculty are working on and look for new ways to disseminate their knowledge. So this is a project that Sophus Reinhardt is looking at. He feels that Benjamin Franklin's writings in The Way to Wealth are actually more influential than Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. And so he's writing about how all of these are the little sayings like early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. A penny saved is a pound, or yeah, right, I'm doing really well on my Ben Franklin today. It's the jet lag, that's what we can always go back to. At any rate, there are over 1,000 publications of these little sayings that were in the Poor Richard's Almanac. And what we did is we collected 1,000 examples of them, created metadata so that you could have a structured, searchable database. This is all available online for you to have a look at. So I'm just inflicting death by PowerPoint, not death by clicking through websites to you. But it's a great product. We were then able to visualize a number of the more interesting pamphlets through flip books that you can search. We digitized them. There's all kinds of data visualization mapping tools so that you can see where the publication started and as over time how they went throughout Europe and Asia. And so we help what would have been a bibliography, a plain old print bibliography, which is important, but this created a much more interactive product, a new way for faculty to disseminate their research. We also, and again another eye chart for you, is we focused on creating use cases, something that we had not done before. We had, we felt we knew our customers, but we hadn't been explicit about, I am a faculty member, I'm teaching the Nokia case tomorrow, and I'd like I'm an academic market, and this is the product that I'm going to use. And we matched all of this up so that we could be very explicit about the types of products and services so that we could excel in our execution. And this is the kind of email that I love to get. I got this one just the day before Thanksgiving from Luis Viciera, who is actually our Senior Associate Dean for International Efforts. And he said, I just want to express my gratitude for all you have done to help He Yang and me on getting the MSCI index data from them, as it is very important to our research. And we are very aware that without your help and your work with MSCI, this would not have happened. I wish you and your loved ones a happy Thanksgiving. This is those MasterCard moments, right? Absolutely priceless that a faculty member would take the time to not only thank, but recognize the importance of this and wish us a happy holiday. So when I think about execution and I get this type of response, I think we're on the right road. Third one, I'll help you with this one, okay? Third part of the formula. This is my staff, and Baker Library did look pretty bad in that first photo. This is not Baker Library, this is my staff at the food bank, at the Boston Food Bank. When we think about culture, this to me is one of the hardest pieces to instill a culture of collaboration, a culture of innovation, a culture of camaraderie, and where we come together when we need to come together takes a lot of effort. And so we spend a great deal of time talking about culture, learning about culture, thinking about how we as an adaptive org and a collaborative culture will manifest that in our actions. So we do 4 of these events a year out in the community. It is a fabulous team building and culture building exercise. So I thought I would start with that one. We also really, really use our faculty's work. It's interesting, when I approached, this is Teresa Mobley up in the upper left-hand corner. She's written a fabulous book called The Progress Principle. And she and her colleagues had looked, again, at hundreds of companies, and what they've identified what really motivates employees to be engaged. And they went in thinking, so they did staff and management, and then compared the two lists. What do you think was number one, the management thought motivated staff? Number one thing. What would management think is the number one thing that motivates staff to be engaged in their work? Anyone? This is where I'm making you work. Number one thing.
Maybe recognition.
Recognition, exactly. Compensation, recognition, those two things. What she found actually from the staff's perspective is staff wanted to know that they were contributing to meaningful work. And so what she's written is the progress principle. She's worked with our staff. We all have a copy of the book. We've done study sessions around the book. And we keep, this is a copy of a board that we keep in our group lunchroom that maps the progress on all of our key projects so that people can see it manifested. We've also worked with Hiro Takeuchi, who's a knowledge management expert, and we created a whole new collaborative workspace. The first time we've moved out of the big, what do you call them, cubicle farm, you know, where everybody was sitting at cubes and couldn't even see over the cubes. We created all these isolated spaces. We blew up that area, much like the back of the library, and created almost a form of BA. And so Hiro came and talked to us about the notion of BA and how you create space where people can work collaboratively. We also have worked a great deal with Shrikant Datar down here on the left, and I think Shrikant is an alum, is he not, of IIM? And he teaches a course on design thinking. 6 of us took his course. And while we were auditing it, you know, it was still, we were a part of it, and then we mounted a team in the iLab space that was working with a cohort of entrepreneurs over the summer. So what we're trying to do is actually live this culture of innovation. We also have a group that we call the Culture Club, and they help us stay on top of everything that we're doing to keep this front of mind. And I thought you might find their project charter of interest. To meet the challenges inherent in the evolving 21st century research, teaching, and learning landscape successfully, KLS must be an adaptive and collaborative organization with a culture that fosters trust and open, direct, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, it, again, keeps it in front of people of what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. These are some other of our faculty members who have come and worked with us as an all staff, looking at culture, Willie Shee, Amy Edmondson on teaming, how you bring teams together at certain times as needed, as opposed to having org charts that keep everyone separated into silos, although we have an org chart, and I'll show that to you in a minute. And Bob Eccles, who studies knowledge creation professional organizations, and he really sees the library as that kind of professional organization. So we bring them in to work with us. And I'm so surprised that faculty are surprised we're interested in their work, because that's one of the beauties of being in a management school, is that we're just surrounded by people who are thinking about how we should manage our libraries. The fourth one is structure. I love this because I also say to my staff, we use a Spanish proverb kind of as a tagline, is we build the road as we travel. Oops, sorry. And I'm not sure exactly where they're traveling to there. I said, we'll do this one. I'll never build an airplane while we fly. I'll give you that. But we will build a road as we travel. So some of the structures, you know, this is the ubiquitous org chart is my least favorite structure that we have built, but it is one that the staff really wanted. We wanted to move away from having a more hierarchical, we were a very hierarchical organization, so we've really flattened that and created 2 groups that you actually don't see here, but on the left side, these are all of the public-facing engagement staff, and on the back, so kind of the front office, on the right is the back office that really is the engine of making the right or the left side move. And people work back and forth across these pretty siloed org chart boxes. But again, as I said, it was something that people really wanted to anchor. Where do I belong? What group do I belong to? And so this still becomes an organizational structure that's important. This project pyramid, again, very simple. We adopted this from our IT group. The Harvard University IT group uses this because we have so many projects going on. What we try to do is limit the game changers, because those are the big, hairy, audacious goal jobs. And those projects, you can't take on too many of those projects. They'll kill you. So we are very clear about what is a game changer, what are enhancements, and the enhancements are really based on our foundation of core services, which projects are considered enhancements of those that then just become core. And so it shows how all of these projects work together. Again, people like to see what's the connectedness. How does my work really impact moving us ahead? We also have an opportunity management process. I think it kind of looks like a Monopoly game if you go where you pass go and collect your $200. But we also found that we, at HBS, we often say we have an embarrassment of riches. And I think our riches are not the monetary riches that we have, but the riches of opportunity. And so again, so that we don't overload our pyramid, we work through an opportunity at the game changer level to make sure that it is going to move us ahead and not be a resource drain. So those are our 4 primary, and then the 2 secondary management practices we chose are innovation. And this is where I think the most opportunity for us to be creative and maybe to fail a lot. You know, there's an awful lot said that we don't learn unless we fail at something. Fail is a big word. I don't know how many of you really want to fail at something. Learn incrementally, okay, I'll go with that. But failure, I'm not that comfortable with it. But we have learned a great deal, and some of our ideas have taken off. This is some work that we took from Shrikant's course on thinking, again, strategically about where we are in our project design. We also use a lot of Eric Ries's ideas from the Lean Startup, the build, measure, learn, so that you're constantly getting a minimum viable product out, testing it, iterating on it, and then moving it into an operational stage. This is also a huge culture shift for us, because we never went to our customers with anything that wasn't absolutely perfect. So this has been a shift, and what we're finding is people love this because we can get new ideas out, we can generate a lot more enthusiasm for changes that are taking place in the library, rather than waiting 6 to 8 months or longer, 2 to 5, 10 years to get something done. So we have found this kind of cycle a great way to support innovation. Baker 3.0, as Anil said, we all know what that means. It's moving not through version control of version 1, version 2, version 3. This is really creating the semantic library. I'm most excited about this work and least capable to talk about it because my veneer is very thin. We have a number of computer scientists working with us, computer engineers, high-end semantic developers that I think are doing some really interesting projects in looking at how we connect across all of HBS's information, not just the information that's in the library, but the growing amount of information that resides in everyone's websites, in the repositories that they manage, or the data sets that they either manage locally or have in the Harvard repository. So we have to be thinking very broadly across all of these data sets, think differently about the modeling that we do, move to a graph modeling. That's all I can say about that. And it's been a really, really fascinating voyage for us around Baker 3.0. And then the last, number 6, is partnerships. I love this. Now, this is the Mona Lisa. I'm sorry I had to blow her up. But if you look carefully, she's made of thousands of little pictures. And that is the only way we're going to succeed, is creating partnerships. So we've been working very, very hard, and you think, oh, right, you see a bunch of Harvard stuff up here. Harvard is one of the most fragmented, unified organizations that I've been in. And it is Drew Faust, or President Faust's main thrust in what she calls One Harvard. Well, we aren't even at One HBS yet, so we're still working at that. And I find these partnerships with the iLab, which is the high sign, with HBX, which is the new online learning platform that HBS has put in place, with Harvard Business Publishing. We, for the first time, have 50 products that we are selling through HBS, or through HBP. They're called Case Flash Forwards. And this was, it was a great partnership with HBP, where they said, you know what, we really need information to update the cases, because many faculty teaching the case want to know what happened to the industry, what happened to the protagonist, what happened to the company, so that they're prepared as part of their teaching prep. So we've written 50 of these on the top selling cases, and we'll have 200 in the casebook by the end of the year. So it's a great way for us to use our knowledge skills in a totally different way. New York Public Library will be partnering with them, with the Science, Industry, and Business Library, and providing services to our alums in New York. And the Maritime Museum in Hong Kong will be mounting our China trade exhibit with them in 2 years. So there's a lot of work. Oh, and Company Plus is an OPM, one of our exec ed participants. The president of that company it's a company that helps startups get going. And so we've been doing research for the various companies working with Chuck to get their business prospectuses done. So we do a whole review of their pitch and make sure that all the data is correct in it. So these kinds of partnerships are hugely important to us. So this was Baker in 1927. It was the heart of the campus, and I think still sits very squarely in not only the physical, but the emotional space. We moved to Baker 2.0 about 10 years ago when we went onto the web. This was considered our move into the electronic world. And this is what we think Baker 3.0 looks like. It is literally connecting the information that goes across the campus, as opposed to that just sits in Baker Library. So some of the lessons that we've learned, first of all, it's all about people. It's not about your books, it's not about your collections, it's about the people that can provide the services. So I was delighted to hear that come out this morning, is that great libraries, it's good libraries provide services, great libraries create community. So that's number one for us. Number two, and we're from the land of Thoreau, and one of my favorite sayings of his is simply simplify. We make life very complicated. It's the library way. If we can throw more metadata at something and visualize data 18 ways to Sunday, and we just make things too complicated. So how do we think about one of the reasons why Google is so popular? It's simple. It's easy. I put in a term, and voila, I have more information than I know what to do with. I think that's kind of a bad thing, but some people think that's a good thing. So simply simplify. And the third thing that we have learned is engage, engage, engage. So that first, graph that I showed you of up the engagement, up the communication throughout a process. Again, I don't think there's any rocket science in these three things, but those are the ones I take away. Does anybody know where this bridge is? You seen this photo? It's in Honduras. Do you see any problem with this bridge? It's sort of not over a river, is it? Well, actually, this bridge is the result of some incredible engineering. It was built to last through the most incredibly high force winds of a hurricane. Guess what? It did. Except, so The problem is the building or the bridge lasted. The force of the hurricane moved the bloody river. So I love this image because we can do so much to plan for the best thing, and 3 days of rain, Chennai is probably feeling this today, 3 days, 75 inches of rain, 150 bridges wiped out, 1 river moved. So think about your planning and constantly look for what might come out of the blue, that if you build too much, you're not going to be flexible to address. So this is, I told Tim that I would do a little pitch for his book, Business School Libraries in 21st Century. A number of people in this room have contributed to this book. This book came out of a conversation at the Stanford conference. So here's my challenge for you. The last thing I'll leave you with is what's happening in India. Seems to me that you have a lot going on here. So I'll look forward to your version of the book. Thank you very much. And I was supposed to leave some time for questions, but.
Yes. We will be having question and answer sessions soon.
Okay.
So I leave it to the audience if there are any questions. You can take your questions up there.
Oh.
Please identify yourself and then ask your question. And please be brief and give opportunity for how much time do you have?
Okay. There you go. Right.
I'm Swati Bhattacharya, librarian of Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. I have one question in your diagram that engagement versus communication, as it goes that sometimes that measurement, developing assessment, that stage comes, you assess things. I mean, can you just highlight some of the things that how you build this assessment or indicators and how you implement those assessments? Thank you.
Sure. So the question is about assessment and the metrics and processes that we have in place to ensure that we're on track. I'd say it varies. You know, it's the typical answer, it depends. But it is always built into the plan. Depends on the kind of project. So if it's one-on-one with the faculty, we will constantly be talking with that faculty member. We never move to the next stage of any project until we have a form of sign-off that we're heading in the direction that the faculty member would like to go. Larger projects, we have a feedback loop. We are devotees of after-action reviews, but we use after-action reviews in the sense that the US military had set up is an after-action review is kind of a misnomer, because what you do is upfront decide what you're going to track during the project, and then you check in on at regular points on the particular progress of the project, and then you have a debrief at the end. I think people tend to use after-action reviews just as that debrief at the end. As a formative way of assessment, you can then do the modification as opposed to summative when you wait to the end. We also have lots of feedback loops on our websites. Our staff are constantly saying, is this what you were looking for? We did get rid of that. You know, remember when Microsoft had that little paper clip that came up all the time and you kind of wanted to slap it down? But we are constantly, I think it's more informal feedback than it is formal that we act on more often. Does that help?
Yeah, it's okay, but I just wanted to know how you convert it into a measure. For example, when you are taking a feedback loop, everyone is giving comments, good or bad, or how you transfer it into some kind of
So we don't, I think we are much more qualitative focused than we are quantitative. We certainly keep numbers like how many people come in through the gates and how many books circulate and yada yada, all that kind of stuff. But to me, that isn't what we're looking at. It's more the qualitative pieces.
This is Giridhar here. Here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, very far. Lucky.
Okay, I'm Giridhar Kunkur from BITS Pilani. My question is, you talked about engaging people, engaging all the time, especially while formulating your strategy.
Right.
Can you just give us some examples of engaging students in any of your activities?
Sure. So we have several angles in there. Number one is with the MBA program management group. So the administrative group are huge partners with us. So we get a lot of feedback. We also are a part of their survey of, there's a whole section on library and information services to the MBAs as part of their yearly assessment. So we get feedback from them in a form of engagement we then plan. We also work extremely hard with our colleagues in our various research centers. We have 7 of them, so we're engaging with them all of the time. You know, there just isn't anything. The library is not an island at HBS. It really is integrated into, am I overstating it? We're really integrated into the pulse of the place. And so I hadn't really thought about how we engage. It's just part of all the conversations. Just a lot of conversations. We have a lot of meetings, it feels like. But I think they're very productive because they do keep the conversation moving ahead. But in the early stages around the strategy planning is we brought in our CFO. Truthfully, Rick Melnick's one of the best guys, again, one of our MBAs, knows the school inside and out, fabulous guy, but he didn't have a clue what we were talking about half the time. And so just by spending time with Rick to explain, like he said, do you mean you keep buying a journal even if nobody used it that year? And I said, yeah, we do. He goes, really? Why? And so then we have this conversation about, as a research library, how it's important to have runs of journals, which was something he just didn't understand before. So I think it's just that constant conversation across all your stakeholder groups that's so important. And that's a change in our culture too, because with all due respect to librarians, is that we aren't often seen as a very gregarious, fun bunch. Now, I know this group will be very different, but we tend to be a more reticent group of professionals. So just constantly talking to people has made a really big difference.
Debra, I had a question.
Sure, yeah.
I am Anil Kumar from IIM Ahmedabad. Generally, the problem that libraries in this part of the world face is lack of information resources for because of lack of financial resources. Now, does Baker Library have instances where you don't have the resource at your end, and do you engage in resource sharing with other libraries?
Right, yeah.
Or are you self-sufficient in terms of resources, whether it is content or finance?
You know, it's kind of like if you build a house with 2 rooms, you'll fill them up. If you build a house with 10 rooms, you'll fill them up. If you build a house with 20 rooms, you'll fill them up. So we consume resources as much as we can, and there's never enough. And that's why it's a difficult conversation sometimes for me, because we do not have budget reductions. We have never I've never had to, I'm so sorry to say that, because sometimes it's a hard conversation to have. But our dean believes so much in the library, but he still only funds about 50% of our ask. So in fact, 3 years ago, we go through this whole budget process, and we asked for a whole bunch of things. We talked about all this innovation we were doing, Baker 3.0. We showed him a whole bunch of projects that we had done with faculty. And he came back to us and he said, you know, I'm going to give you something you didn't ask for. I'm going to give you a business development position because you need to figure out ways to fund innovation. You are like a bottomless pit. So I would like you to take some responsibility for funding your own innovation. So that's where Baker for Business started. So B4B is a new service line that we're offering to our alumni. So it's a fee-based service for research support. We're also selling the products that we sell through HBP are ours. We have licensed some content that we digitized working in partnership with Cengage. So we're looking for ways to fund the library. At the same time, we partner all the time. We are a huge lender and borrower of resources. We work both collaboratively with the HBS community and probably more actively with our ABLD, the American Business Library Directors Group. But there's just, it doesn't matter how much money you get, you can always find ways to spend more. So again, that's the whole priority. How do you prioritize and do what you want to do? Because the aspirations are many, and they are expensive. So I'm going to be around for the next 3 days, so I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have. So, one more? Oh, okay. One more? Okay, I'm sorry, gentlemen, but cutting into your time.
Myself, Lavji Jala from MICA. You have talked about the innovation. So is there, the Baker Library has done any innovation types of thing that will be, it will be the exemplary for the other libraries? Because Baker Library is considered one of the best library in the management. And we would like to know, is there any innovation happen during any time,
I think, so the question about some of the products and services that we've innovated on, I think I'd love to show you, or could spend more time talking about some of the products that we've developed for faculty. Another one that we've developed for disseminating faculty's work is Working Knowledge, and we sent out a little brochure for you, which is a free newsletter about faculty's work. I think this is something that we should all be doing. Our number one job is to connect people to our faculty's work. So this is a way of getting it out to the broader community. Working Knowledge now has about 200,000 subscribers and is the second highest hit of web property from the HBS family of web properties. So I really would love to show you Baker 3.0. We're at a prototype stage, and we'll have more to show once we're implementing a new content management system, a discovery platform, and an information management system, which is creating, I think, the first business ontology that will be available. So there's a number of things that are coming out. But our website, the current website is old and being redone and not going to be a new website. It's what we're calling a discovery platform. So I think that will be something of interest to libraries as well. But as I said, I'll be around, happy to answer any other questions you have over the next while. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Debra. It was really very good, very insightful, and we would want to learn more from you. You are there